She lived a childhood in which pain became habitual. Frida Kahlo learned to tolerate suffering before she could read. At the age of 6, she became gravely ill with polio, a viral disease that affects the nervous system. The disease attacked her right leg, which was left thinner and shorter than the other for life. Because of this, she began to limp. It became a huge trauma for the little girl, not only physically, but also psychologically. The other children teased her, "Frida the wooden leg," but instead of crying, she learned to fight. To hide her leg, Frida wore long, puffy skirts all her life, but even beneath the layers of fabric, she couldn't hide the pain deeper than her skin. The disease robbed her of her childhood in the usual sense. She hardly played with other children, spent much time in bed or at home. But it was during this difficult time that she found a support, her father, Guillermo Kahlo. He was a photographer of German descent. Seeing his daughter's suffering, he tried to distract her from her pain. He taught her how to handle the camera, showed her how the light worked, how to catch the right shot. Together they processed the photos in the dark room. He also gave her brushes and paints, and Frida began to paint. It became an outlet for her. If the body fails, the soul can speak through art. It's hard to believe, but despite her limp, she played sports. Frida swam, cycled, played soccer. These were men's sports, and in those days it was almost a challenge to society for a girl in Mexico. She didn't want to be a victim and tried to prove that she could live life to the fullest, even with a bad leg. And just when it seemed that she had already gone through the hardest part, life dealt her a new, much worse blow. On September 17, 1925, when Frida was 18 years old, she was riding in an ordinary city bus through the streets of Mexico City with a friend. At one point, the bus collided with a streetcar. The impact was so violent that the bus was literally torn apart. People were screaming, panicking, many were seriously injured, and some died on the spot. Frida was among those who survived, but by a miracle. The metal handrail pierced her body, entering through her pelvis and exiting through her abdomen. Her spine was broken in 3 places. Her ribs were fractured, her collarbone, her shoulder was broken, and her foot was crushed. Medics were shocked at the extent of the injuries and were not sure if she would even be able to get out of bed, let alone walk. Frida spent months bedridden, completely immobilized in a cast and in terrible pain. She was deprived of movement, but not deprived of will. It was during this time, all alone with her body in a cast, that she began to paint. Above her bed, her parents set up a mirror so she could see herself. Her father, realizing that his daughter needed something to occupy her mind, brought her brushes, paints, and canvases. But the real canvas first became her own cast. She painted directly on the bandages, on the corsets in which she had been confined for weeks. These were her first works, not for exhibitions and fame, but for survival. Each painting became a way of saying, "I'm still here, I am alive, I feel." In 1926, she finished her first serious work, a self-portrait, which she gave to her friend with whom she was riding on that very bus. In the painting, she is herself. Calm look, but in the eyes of pain. This work immediately showed Frida would not paint beautifully. She would paint the truth. She worked lying down, brush in one hand, mirror in front of her eyes. Her palette is a reflection of her soul, deep shadows, bright colors, details that catch the eye. And with each new work she discovered herself, and reassembled herself piece by piece. This is how the first self-portraits appeared, in which there was no falsity, only pain, honesty, and soul. Importantly, she didn't try to portray herself as beautiful. She painted as she felt, with sadness in her eyes, with a body full of cracks, with an open heart. Frida didn't plan to become an artist. She was just trying to survive. And what was meant to destroy ended up giving her a voice. Finding herself between life and death, she began to speak to the world in the language of painting, and the world heard her. By the end of 1927, Frida was able to get out of bed and start walking with the help of a corset. She returned to her friends who were involved in student politics. Her paintings became deeper, more personal, more powerful. But even painting couldn't completely drown out the loneliness. She lacked not only movement but also warmth, understanding, love. And then in her life appeared a man who would change her fate forever, Diego Rivera. He was a famous artist, big, loud, confident. His murals adorned walls all over Mexico. When Frida met the painter Diego Rivera, she was 22 years old. He was 21 years older, already famous, respected, confident. She was young, just beginning her artistic journey. When Frida showed him her paintings, he was amazed. He saw in her not just talent, he saw real strength, honesty and pain, and she in him, everything, a teacher, inspiration, a man to whom you can give your heart. They married in 1929. Frida herself later said, "There were two tragedies in my life, the accident and Diego turned out to be worse. This marriage was the most turbulent phase of her life. Diego often cheated on her, and one of the most painful relationships was his affair with Frida's own sister, Christina. This blow she experienced particularly hard. Her painting Memory Heart was a direct reflection of these feelings. On it, Frida stands with a knife-pierced heart, blood flowing to the floor, and a face without expression. But despite the betrayal, she could not leave him. They divorced in 1939, but remarried a year later. This addiction was almost painful. Frida even tattooed his name, as if she wanted to leave his mark on her forever, not only in her soul, but also on her body. Even when they were far apart, he remained in her mind. In one of her self-portraits, Diego in My Thoughts, she painted him directly on her forehead. He lived in her mind as a part of herself. Diego's betrayal produced some of Frida's most powerful and personal works, which became her voice to the world. Life with Diego taught Frida not only to love to the point of pain, but also to fight. With each betrayal, with each disappointment, something new grew inside her, a desire to speak louder, to be heard not only as an artist's wife, but as a person. And she began to use her art not only to show her inner pain, but also to talk about things that society tries to ignore: women's rights, politics, freedom of body and spirit. She expressed herself openly. She joined the Communist Party of Mexico and actively participated in the political life of the country. She was not just an artist, but part of movements that demanded change. But one of the most unexpected turns in her life was meeting Lev Trotsky. In 1937, Trotsky and his wife, Natalia Sedova, arrived in Mexico, fleeing Stalin's persecution. They needed a safe haven, and Diego and Frida offered to let them live in their home, the very same blue house in Coyoacan. Through painting, Frida struggled with what was forced upon her, as a woman, as a sick person, and as a person. In one of her self-portraits, she painted herself with a short haircut, wearing a man's suit and a drawn-on mustache. It was an open protest against the standards of femininity and what society expects from a woman. It was as if she was saying, "I am me, and I'm going to be who I want to be." Frida's feminism was not a slogan, it was her way of life. She fought for the right to be herself, not with words, but with every picture, action, and look. Politics for her was not offices and speeches. It was a struggle for the human being, for the individual. Frida did not paint power, but the pain of the people, women and all the oppressed. And although her paintings were a protest, they were also a confession. In each stroke, an inner cry. In 1953, in Mexico City, opened the first solo exhibition of Frida Kahlo. She could no longer walk. The pain was stronger than ever. Doctors categorically forbade her to appear at the exhibition. But Frida did it her way. She ordered her bed to be put in a truck and brought directly to the gallery. She was carried into the hall on a stretcher. She lay in the middle of the exhibition as a living part of her exhibit. In traditional Mexican dress, with flowers in her hair and a glass of tequila in her hand. People gave her a standing ovation. That scene became legendary, the moment when art and life merged completely. Later, her paintings began to appear in museums around the world. One of her self-portraits was bought by the Louvre, and Frida became the first artist from Latin America whose work entered the collection of France's premier museum. It was a historic moment. Fame came to her not in her youth, not in an easy period, and when she was almost unable to get out of bed. But that was the strength, recognized not only for her talent, but also for her resilience. Frida became a symbol because she didn't hide herself. She didn't pretend that everything was fine, and that's what touched people to the core. How do you live when every morning starts with pain? When ordinary things, getting up, walking, sitting down, become agony? Frida Kahlo knew the answer. She didn't just live with the pain, she existed in it every day. After the accident, her body never fully recovered. During her life, Frida underwent more than 30 surgeries on her spine, legs, hip, and foot. Some doctors promised relief, but more often than not, after another surgery, things only got worse. Sometimes the stitches would not heal for months. Sometimes she could not sleep for nights because of the pain. Frida tried to endure, but as the years went by, the pain became unbearable. Then strong painkillers came into play, first pills, then morphine, which she was prescribed by doctors. But even morphine did not always help. In order to get through the evening, at least somehow, she began to mix it with alcohol. It wasn't a habit for pleasure. It was a way to survive. She used to say, "I drink to drown my pain." But she learned to swim. Frida was well aware that she was becoming addicted, but she simply had no other choice. In August 1953, Frida Kahlo had her right leg amputated below the knee due to gangrene. This operation was a severe blow to her. She wrote in her diary, "They cut off my leg 6 months ago. It has been centuries of agony, and at times I have almost lost my mind. I keep wanting to kill myself. Diego is what keeps me from it, through my vain idea that he will miss me. But never in my life have I suffered more." After the amputation, Frida began using a prosthetic, which she decorated with a red boot with Chinese embroidery and a small bell. It was her way of maintaining her individuality and dignity despite her physical limitations. However, Frida's psychological state deteriorated. She suffered from depression, which worsened after the amputation, and her dependence on pain medication increased. After the amputation of her leg, Frida Kahlo even attempted suicide by taking an overdose of painkillers. However, she continued to create and left behind a legacy that inspires millions of people around the world. She posed for photos while sitting in a wheelchair, with an artificial leg adorned with red ribbons and flowers. In the photo, she is smiling. That smile is not for the camera. It was her way of saying, "I'm still strong. I haven't given up." In recent weeks, she hardly got out of bed. The illness was taking her strength, but not her soul. She continued to paint, and one of them was her last. A few days before she died, she finished a work called Long Live Life, with bright red watermelons and the inscription Viva la Vida. This painting is like a cry through the pain, as if Frida wanted to leave the world the main lesson. Even in the most difficult moments you can say life, yes. July 13th, 1954. Frida did not become. She was only 47 years old. In the official documents stated death from acute pneumonia, but there were suspicions that she might have committed suicide. The last entries in her diary say a lot. She wrote, "I hope that leaving will be joyful, and that I will never return." These words have become an enigma that is still debated to this day. Frida showed that art is not only beauty, but also a weapon. She used it not just to express emotions, she survived, fought, spoke to the world. Her brush was stronger than any pills and doctors. Disability didn't break her, it made her a legend. Frida did not hide her pain, but on the contrary, showed it, turning it into art, and that's what made her close to millions around the world. More than 70 years have passed since the death of Frida Kahlo, but interest in her life is only growing. Every year in different countries there are exhibitions, parades, and festivals in her honor. In Mexico there are parades where hundreds of people dress up like Frida, flowers in their hair, brightly colored clothes, painted eyebrows. In Houston since 2005, there has been an annual Frida Festival, which attracts more than 30,000 visitors and includes exhibitions, fashion shows, concerts, and street fairs. Exhibitions of her work are regularly opened in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Even in Russia, large-scale exhibitions of Frida's original paintings have been held and queued up. Museum Frida Kahlo in Mexico City, where she lived, every year visit about 500,000 people. And it's not just tourists, it's those who have been touched by her art. Millions of people wear T-shirts with her face on them. Her image has become a fashion symbol. It's on laps, bags, pillows, even socks. Her face is like a brand. Frida Kahlo is not just an artist from the past. She is a voice of pain, strength, and freedom that still resounds today. She is remembered not for her beautiful paintings, but for the truth she was not afraid to show. And that is why she will forever be more than just a face on a T-shirt.